Hey y'all, today I want to get on and talk to you about love. What is love? And how do I know if I'm being loving, like actually loving, or if I'm not actually loving? Because loving isn't about not confronting, that's important. There's times to confront things. There's times even to be provocative. There's time, as Ecclesiastes, there's a time for everything, right? But what does real love look like? Because I'm going to challenge a lot of us that love has a lot of different facets and aspects, and it all comes from the heart, right? But love is a power. It is a power that is above every power. And when you really understand true love, that's the operation of the highest power. But it doesn't manifest the way we think in our culture. True love is what Jesus walked in. And someone who's operating in a false love will gaslight those that are walking in pure love and will tear them down. Religion will tear them down and come against them. All kinds of things of the world will make them point to them and be like, see, they're weak when they're really being humble. They'll gaslight them. Oh, that's a false humility. That's, stuff like that. So we're going to look at how does God define love and how did he walk it out? What does the scripture say about this? And also, how do we know how to do it in a moment? Because you could look at a video, two identical looking videos from the outside. And only if you have the insider information and you know the heart motives of the people, just like God knows our heart, would you actually know the difference when they look almost identical and the people in the video are doing the exact same thing, it appears from the surface level. But when you really know their heart and you actually know the people and you know their motivations and you know the backstory and you have the inside, all of a sudden, what's going on, one is with clean hands and a pure heart, and they're acting in that way. And another is working from exploitation and exposure and that kind of thing. One is covering a multitude of sins, and one is taking advantage. So let's look at, what does the Bible say? And of course, everyone thinks of 1 Corinthians 13, right? That's the love chapter. So I'd like to start there. Let's define love so we can get a framework to work off of. But love isn't just the definitions. It's not just the P's and Q's, but you have to have a working skeleton to have a framework. So that's what we're going to establish today. What are the words? What are the meaning? Then we'll get into some deeper understanding of, let's define the true things so we can see the false when it comes, we'll recognize it. A person who is, in the industry where they look for counterfeit money, they don't study the counterfeit. It's kind of like deliverance ministry. They focus on the devil. Well, you don't study the devil to recognize the devil. You study the real thing. You study God to understand what the contrast is. And you'll recognize the devil when you see him, and you'll recognize that spirit in the contrast because you spent time studying and being intimate with the Holy Spirit, right? With the Lord. And so in the same way, we're going to first study and look at love. What is the highest and best definition of love? Walking and manifesting, of course, Jesus Christ, or Jesus the Christ, or Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Christ, right? Christ is just a title, right? His title. He's the Messiah. He's the anointed one. So he walked in perfect, full blast anointing of the Holy Spirit, totally emanating from him in perfection. What did that love look like? And it doesn't look like what the world's definition of love is, and even many Christians' definition of love. So let's look at it. 1 Corinthians 13 says, if I speak with the tongues of men and of angels. Okay, so first word there, keyword, speak. So if I use the power of speech in the tongues of men and angels, but I don't have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. So what's the implication here? If I use my power of speech, right, but I don't do it from a heart of love and with pure hands and a clean heart, clean hands and a pure heart, right, then I'm just making noise, right? And a noisy gong or clanging cymbal is like, well, I'm just making noise, but I have no power. I don't have influence or power. If I have the gift of prophecy, okay, so now gifts. So first is power, now gifts. If I have the gift of prophecy and I know all mysteries and all knowledge, okay, so what's the next thing? Knowledge, right? Knowledge is what people want, right? They want power, they want wisdom, they want knowledge. So if you use your gift of prophecy, in this case, revelation, mysteries, knowledge, you know the deepest, most powerful things about the most powerful things. But if you don't do it from a heart of love, it says, I am nothing. So the first one was, you're just making noise, so you have no power. And the second one is, if I have all these gifts of prophecy, if you're a prophet and you have spot on words of knowledge about people, you can open people up, you can walk in power in that sense, you use your gift, because the gift and calling of God are irrevocable, and know all mysteries and all knowledge. If you are just the wisest person because you can hear from the Father on everything, but if you're not moved and being motivated by actual love, then I am nothing. Then you don't have real identity. Your identity is totally jacked. If I give all I possess, all my possessions, to feed the poor, so you're doing good works, you're out there, look at me, I'm doing good, I'm feeding the poor, and I surrender my body to be burned. You're even willing to lay down your life for others and possibly be a martyr. But do not love. But you actually don't apply real love. It profits me nothing. Meaning you don't have real wealth. You don't really know the principles of wealth building and having things of value, because you can't even operate in and know and understand real love when it's staring you in the face, when it's reaching out, when it's trying to help you. You literally use it, abuse it, and kick it to the side. You can't see it. And therefore, you're never able to get that wealth. So your power, your identity, and real wealth, that which is really valuable, you miss. You miss it all, even though you operate in it all. So now we get to verse 4. What is love? Well, God says love is patient. Right? Now, patient, demonstrating patience despite difficulties. Love is patient. Love is kind. Right? Is it kind to gaslight people? Is it kind to play games and be like you're in high school? Is it kind to be abusive and use people only for your own gain, or to tear them down and play games with them? That's not kindness. That's not love. So love is kind. It is not jealous. If you operate from a heart of jealousy and you're tearing people down around you while looking like you're doing good, and you're separating brethren, and you're talking evil about them to build yourself up, to make yourself feel better, that's not love. That's jealousy. Love does not brag. Oh wait, also on jealousy is, especially when someone is being generous with you, if you are jealous that they have something you want, and they're reaching out to help bring you up, and you're trying to tear them down so that everybody's down, everybody's low, why don't you let them help you up? But no, you're too jealous to see that, hey, they want to help you come up with them, but you're too busy trying to tear them down to realize they're trying to give you a hand up. You'd rather tear everybody down to your level. And so that's the fruit of jealousy and the operation of it, instead of recognizing real love when it's trying to reach out to you. Then the next thing is love does not brag. In other words, doesn't praise oneself excessively, right? It's not arrogant, or you could say proud or haughty, right? If you're walking around very arrogant, that's not love. It does not act unbecomingly. Well, what does that mean? Unbecomingly. Well, kind of a generalized descriptive of this unbecomingly: to act in defiance of social and moral standards with resulting disgrace, embarrassment, and shame. So acting unbecomingly doesn't mean not having fun or not being silly or childlike. So obviously those are going to have situational discerning, you have to have situational discernment there. But when you go into a place and you leave it a total disaster for somebody else to pick up after you, and you don't, like, let's say you go in and you're having fun and you're being silly and things get kind of messed up, if you put those things back in order before you leave, then you have courtesy. That's love. Even though you were having freedom, you still have love behind it. You don't leave work for someone else to do and you make a big mess and you're rude, because that's rude, because love is not rude, right? So you have love. And so that would be an unbecoming, like even if you knocked something over at a store accidentally, or when you fell, right? You don't just leave a big old mess for the worker to have to come pick up now after you and make you look bad, because now you're making the Lord look bad. So that would be an area of acting unbecomingly, even while acting in freedom. So you got to balance things, right? It does not seek its own, right? Seeking your own is using people, is only like having a relationship and being nice to someone for a period just for the sake of using them, right? And then kicking them aside. Those kind of things, those aren't love. And we've all been there. We've all had people do this to us, where they just used us and then kicked us aside when they were done using us, because they were only seeking their own and trying to get something off of you instead of actually sincerely caring about you. Right? So not seeking your own is actually having empathy. But if you don't have empathy, and there are some people who just don't have empathy, they are so damaged, they are so scarred and injured from likely childhood and life experiences or trauma, that they literally can't even, like, they just can't seek other people's good until they deal with and put up a healthy anger boundary, where they can have like a healthy sense of self and are not racked with shame and stuck in a cycle of shame that has them so trapped that they have to push out and make this image that everything's good when it's not. And they're not able to have intimacy, so they're seeking for intimacy in all these other ways that are unhealthy, and then they feel ashamed of it, of how they're doing it, and they can't break out, and then they can't tell anyone because they can't trust anyone. And then they don't even almost trust themselves. And it's a crazy cycle, right? So it's not seeking after its own. It is not provoked. Okay, so how is love not provoked? When someone hurts someone else and they really love them, they're able to not be provoked, because they can see the damage that that person is operating from and not take it personal. Because they go, that's your problem, you're injured. So when you gaslight me, when you talk behind my back and you say all this wicked stuff to try to get a whole bunch of people to hate me because you want to reduce my power that you're perceiving I have, that would be an indication of your problem, of your insecurity and your inability to see for an example, if you were doing that to me, if I'm trying to help you and lift you up and you attack me, you actually weaken. If you weaken me, you're weakening yourself ultimately, because I'm there to help you. And if I can't help you, lift you up, and you tear me down, now we're both down, right? Now that doesn't help anybody, but it's part of a trauma cycle. It's part of trauma and damaged emotions and damaged people that can't function in true, actual love and can't even receive it, right? So then it is not provoked. Does not take into account a wrong suffered. So to not be provoked is to not take into account a wrong suffered, because you just sow it. And the thing is, people that hurt other people don't realize God's watching. And you can't steal from me. You can't reduce me. You can't beat me down, because as much as it might hurt my flesh, for example, it can't touch me, because I know that God is constantly my defender. And I have to intercede for you in prayer, just like Moses did to the people of Israel, because I know that God's not going to have it. If you're abusing someone who's loving you and serving you and you're abusive to them, God is not going to have it. And if you don't repent, like, fear of the Lord's going to come pretty big, and the spirit of might's going to rise up and say, you're not going to hurt my daughter. I'm sorry. And so that frees you to actually have mercy for someone and use your empathy that they don't even have for them. Now, it rejoices with the truth. So verse 6, does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices in the truth. So if you're rejoicing and you're watching someone who's in unrighteousness and you're like just, making fun of them, or you're like rejoicing and laughing and having a good time, like at their expense or at somebody else's expense in the unrighteousness, that would be rejoicing in unrighteousness. But if you're like being friendly, see, again, this is all the heart. If you're being friendly with someone who's in a bad way, to try to relate to them for the pure purpose of trying to make commonality so that you can sow a seed into them, even if they're really far crazy, psychopathic, or on drugs or whatever, that's different, right? So, but that's a position of the heart. So you can't know that you can't just always make that judgment. You don't know the heart of the person seeking it, but you'll know it by its fruit. And that has to be discerned individually. If I could give you two videos look identical, and one will be a person operating from a pure heart and one could not be. But you just can't make that judgment, so why judge, right? Why judge that, and why go around and badmouth people? That we see people doing this, like expose videos and all this stuff. And I'm like, you don't know the heart of that person. Like, why are you wasting time doing that? Anyway, all right, so then we have, it rejoices with the truth. Now it bears all things. What does it mean to bear all things? Well, to put up with annoyance or difficulty is the concept here of bears all things. So you got to put up with the annoyances and the difficulties. You got to endure. You got to put up with it. Now, all things here is putting up, is implied something negative. So bears all things, because the phrasing here is bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. It's a chiastic structure. So on the top end is bears, and the bottom one is endures. To bear and endure, those are negative things. So it puts up with the difficulties and annoyances and endures them. Those are bad and bad. And in the middle, so it has believes and hopes. So faith, hope, and love, remember? So bearing and enduring are encapsulated on top and bottom. The middle point is the point. The believes, or having faith, and then hopes. So faith and hope, remember, so the end, we're going to have the three things that remain is faith and hope, or belief and hope. Believes all things. Now, all things that are good. It believes the good about all things. Every person, it believes the good about them. It doesn't focus on the negative. So if you are spending your time pointing out and focusing on any negative things and bad-mouthing people to build yourself up because you feel self-shame and you're so trapped in your own shame cycle that you can't love people and you can't even feel empathy for anyone because you're so self-consumed and full of pride and arrogance and everything like that, then you can't even focus on what the good is. You can talk a good game, but you can't actually operate in it. And so your talk and your walk, they ain't jiving because you're not actually operating in real love. You're just talking about love, but you're manifesting hatred, contempt, jealousy, envy, anger, bitterness, all of that. Contempt, I think I already said that. So it believes all good things, all things. But the all things here is implied good, and hopes all things, hopes for good things. So the chiastic structure bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things, goes bad, good, good, bad. That's how this is focusing. It's like if you were going to use literature to dial into a point, that love is going to be focused on all the faith in the good things, putting your focus there and hoping for all good things, not focusing on the negative. Okay? But love at the end now, it has the last and the most strongest power is love. Love never fails. So where our focus on good can fail us sometimes because we don't focus on good, or our focus and our hope, we can lose hope and our bones dry up, right? Well, love never fails. So that power, that's what that's saying is love is the highest power. It's the largest power. So love never fails, but it says if there are gifts of prophecy, so we go in here again, gifts of prophecy. So God will go silent. He will stop speaking when you're using your gifts or you're perverting them, and you're going to have to operate you're going to be using other avenues to get that information, or to manipulate, or to just read people instead of use your gift for real. Because when you're in rebellion and you're not walking in love, then you're not gonna operate in that same way. Then things go silent. Because it's not about doing away, because it says where there are gifts of prophecy, they will be done away. Well, done away here does not mean like the gifts of prophecy are no longer, or they ended, or they will ever end. No, the gift of gifts in general will never end because they're given by God. They're not ending in that sense. They're just going silent. They're stopping speaking. They're stopping active application. Okay. If there are tongues, they will cease. Doesn't mean that people will never be able to speak ever again, or that goes away. And you know this because of the opposite of what remains, right? And we'll get there in a minute, but it's just going to go silent. Cease as in stop speaking. When someone doesn't want wisdom and doesn't want your pearl, you stop speaking. You don't offer it because they're too much in rebellion and they don't even seek after wisdom from you. They don't want your pearl. You can go glean from their field all day long. If you're willing to humble yourself, you can receive their pearls. So you rise and they get even more jealous and more envious because you've humbled yourself and received from them their pearls, because they have pearls. Even the ones that are in total rebellion and crazy and whatever, even when they're totally broken, you can still receive from them if you humble yourself, even from a child, because we all have pearls to give each other if we're willing to be humble. And that's strength and that's wisdom, because wisdom can get more always, but people that are operating not in love, they can't. And so they are so prideful, they don't even ask you because they want to shut you up because they're afraid of your power. They don't want you to rise. They're jealous. They're envious. They're not operating in love. If they were operating in love, they would humble themselves and themselves with you and receive your pearls, and they would rise with you. But because they're so racked in themselves and wrapped up in themselves, they won't do it. And so, for we know in part, let's see. It says it will be done away with if there are tongues, they will cease. Okay, so they will, people will stop speaking, or tongues will stop. Like, not that you can't do tongues, but that it goes silent. Like there's nothing like and here can be more broad term for the context of you just stop speaking. If there's knowledge, okay, because we have, again, the prophetic, the speaking and the knowledge, kind of we had that, the intro, now it's coming back in. So if there, for we know, let's see, for if they, we'll see, if there is knowledge, if there's knowledge, it will be done away with. Okay, so like God's knowledge, like the knowledge of God and knowledge in general, it comes from God. God is the source of all knowledge. And so that's eternal. So that's not done away with as in it's going away at some point. It's just that those in rebellion do not want to hear. They don't want to know because they're not listening, right? They lack understanding because wisdom will humble itself. And since they won't humble themselves, they can't receive, then they reject knowledge. They reject true knowledge in the heart. It's not that they can't recite it, it's that they can't receive it, right? They can recite it, but they can't receive it. And so they're sharing from pride their knowledge, but they don't actually walk in wisdom, right? And that's different. So the knowledge can go away because it's either faulty or it's lacking true love behind it, so there's no power on it, or it's just theory, or any number of things that never leads them to actual wisdom. And the walking out, which is the power side of knowledge, it's the physical application and manifestation of knowledge, is wisdom. Okay, so verse 9, for we know in part and we prophesy in part, right? So at this point, there's not a fullness. We know in part. We don't always know everything. We don't have full knowledge. Like in the world to come, you have full capacity, full knowledge, full awareness of God in that sense. Where here we're still in bodies of dust, so kind of we know it in part because this is an imperfect application because we're still learning and growing in it, right? So we know in part, but when the perfect comes, right? When we are walking in the Spirit in perfection, the partial is done away with. The inability to hear is done away with. When we're walking in the Spirit, we can manifest that truth or whatever it is, that imperfection and clarity and perfection. It's not an in part thing. There's layers of understanding there, of course, of application of that understanding. When I was a child, I used to speak like a child and think like a child and reason like a child. Again, here we got 3 things: the power of our speech, the mind, the thinking, the reasoning, right? The knowledge, which is hearkening to the knowledge, right? Like a child. But when I became a man, when I matured, it's talking about when you're childish, you do childish things. So you can't operate in love. You operate in what? A child is very narcissistic, right? They're very self-focused. They're all about themselves. Everything that love isn't. Love is others focused. And if you're always just projecting that, but you're not actually walking in it, or you're doing it self-servingly because and only to get your needs met, then you're really not doing it from a pure, clean hands and a pure heart. Then it's going to manifest that way in your life, and you're not really operating in true maturity. He says, I did away with childish things. When you mature, you do away with childish things. What's childish things? Thinking of yourself first, putting yourself first, being narcissistic, being, all of these immature things, getting in your flesh, You're like, for example, the not accounting a wrong suffered. When you're a child, you count every wrong suffered, and now you're maturing out of it, and you're releasing people, and you're learning to forgive, and you're learning to walk in love, right? And not keep those records of wrong, etc. All right, so then it says, you reason like a child, you did away with childish things. Verse 12, for now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I will know fully, just as I also have been fully known. So again, we have this seeing now being employed dimly. Seeing is in like perspective. I only have a certain perspective, right? And it's dim. I don't have the full picture on people, on situations, background, history. But we're going to know face to face, meaning we're going to see everything in the world to come for what it really is. All things will be shown for what they truly are. All things hidden in the darkness right now, when you hurt people and you're hiding in the darkness, will be revealed. And you'll have to finally deal with all that shame. And you'll probably feel really bad for the crap that you pulled, especially on people who really honestly love you and are seeking to love you in a way that's safe, in a way that you can open up, in a way that you can heal, in a way that all the trauma done to you can be covered safely, where you're not going to be shamed, you're not going to be exposed and exploited like you've been in your whole life. You can be with people who will say, it's okay. I see you, but I still love you. It's okay. You don't have to keep projecting this anymore and hurting other people because you're hurt, right? So it closes saying, verse 13, but now these three abide, right? These three things remain. They meaning they're eternal. Faith or belief, believing, hoping all things, all good things. Faith, hope, because without hope, you perish. You got to have hope, right? You can't just have discernment. You can't just discern all the bad things about everybody and stop there. You got to move toward hope. But God. Yes, I see all the ugly in you, but God. God is bigger than that. Faith is bigger than that. I have faith. I believe all things are possible with God. And I have hope that even someone like you, even someone as broken and jacked up and has hurt me this much and has been the biggest jerk to me, can still get freedom. Can still, if they're willing to humble themselves, get free. And then love, right? The highest power. These three things abide: faith, hope, and love. With the faith and the hope, it allows you to open yourself up to love, to real love. The greatest of these is love. Greatest in what sense? It's the greatest power on earth. But it doesn't operate in the way the world thinks. It doesn't manifest in the way the world manifests the fake success and the fake love and the flattery and the shallow this world, the shallow this world elements of basic needs being met and loving people's basic needs. Like, if you don't have empathy, you can't have real intimacy, which means you can never engage in real love. And people, especially with like sexual sin and sexual stuff in the background, are the ones that are usually the most damaged and are seeking intimacy so bad. They want intimacy so bad and they can't get it. They can't get true intimacy because they're usually so broken in this area. They can't open themselves up to anyone. They can't feel safe to do that. Usually from abuse and whatever. And so they can't ever experience real love. And even when someone tries their best to love them and is really doing it from a pure heart, they can't see it even that way because they have no framework and they actually have no empathy. Their empathy is so shut down because they're so in a shame cycle. They just can't even be loved. And unfortunately, most of the time, to survive, the survivors of that just have to go away from those kind of people because they're just going to continue to abuse them. And it's really unfortunate. But that is what we have for our definition of love. Again, love is patient. Love is kind. It is not jealous. does not brag, it's not arrogant, it's not unbecoming, it does not seek its own, does not provoke, it does not take into account a wrong suffered, it does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices in the truth. So love bears all good things. It bears all bad things. Had that backward, my bad. Bears all things, believes all good things. So it bears all bad things, believes all good things, hopes all good things, endures all those bad things, because love never fails. It's a power that can overcome the hardest heart. So next time, I hope to take this to the now what love isn't, and we'll look at Proverbs 10, 12, and 1 Peter 4, 7 through 8 about how love covers, it doesn't expose and exploit, and what does that really mean? All right, talk to you next time.